Okay, so now we're going to mix the epoxy, and this is going to be a short demonstration on that. Epoxies, which we'll go into at a greater depth later, and you can look on the website for additional information, basically is a resin and a curing agent. This particular formulation is a 2-to-1 mixture, and so we're going to make this 2-to-1. I like to work in these tubs like this because they work as secondary containment. They work as secondary containment deals, so that you don't get a bunch of stuff where you don't want it. Okay, so that was the cure. This is going to be the resin, and once again, it's a 2-to-1 mix, and there's 64 ounces, and we'll put in another 16, and we should have it. Okay? Good. It's kind of like watching paint dry, isn't it? Fun. But you do have to let this drip out. The resin's is thicker than the cure, and so you want to make sure. Now we're going to mix in 4 ounces per gallon of epoxy pigment, and we're using tan on this one. And I want to thin this epoxy out a little bit, so this is a trick of the trade everyone uses, and you can do this. Use some Xylene to thin your material out, and it doesn't make any difference really how much or how little you use. It really is a personal preference. Okay, so let's go ahead and you mix this up for approximately a minute to 2 minutes. Depends on the temperature of the day and how you feel when you're mixing it. You want to mix it 60 seconds. It's going to work fine. And oh, by the way, wear glasses. See what I'm doing here? Boom, put on the glasses. You don't want to get epoxy in your eye. And when you're working with the polyaspartic, be extra careful and get those glasses on, because that stuff is like water and it will pop back up at you just when you don't think it could happen. And when you're mixing it, go ahead and keep the thing down at the bottom. You don't want to introduce a lot of air if you can help it. This particular resin has air releasing agents in it, so you won't get bubbles. And so that's a nice thing about this particular resin. The curing agent will go over damp surfaces, so if you decide to acid etch your surface and neutralize the acid and go over a damp surface, this curing agent will indeed go over damp surfaces and stick and adhere as if it were dry. A nice technological breakthrough over the last decade in some of these curing agents. They can do some really amazing things that were unheard of 2 or 3 decades ago. So we're all set on this. This looks good. It's exactly the way we want it. We didn't spill anything all over the place, so we're in good shape. I am going to, now with the epoxy, you have pretty much a long time to work this stuff. So you can dilly-dally around and it shouldn't be a big issue. If you were using the polyaspartic material, then you wouldn't have time to go get a drink of water. Go ahead and just pour this in, you know, leave a little in your bucket, and today I'm using a 6-inch roller mechanism. Most of the time I'll use 18-inch roller mechanisms, but I decided to save money. The 18-inch roller covers are like $10, This is a 3/8 inch nap. And these were like 4 of them for $8. So I decided to go with this one today. So let's go ahead and start painting this footing right here. As you can see, I've taped it off, and all you really need to do is just get your stuff on there, and doesn't need to go thick, but you do want good coverage. Okay, another question came up. How thick should you go? You know, with the epoxy, you don't have to go thick at all. The coverage rate is somewhere between 200 to 300 square feet per gallon. And in this case, thicker is not better, because if you get it on too thick and you throw those chips into it, the chips can sink into a surface that's too thick. And then when you come and scrape the chips up tomorrow, it can show up as basically a bald spot, you know, with the pigment and epoxy showing through and no chips on it. So in that case, what you have to do is then if you want it to really look right, and if you're doing a full broadcast system, you want to, you're going to have to double chip it. And that's just a pain in the butt. It's not going through the process a second time for no good reason. Okay, so hey, a question just came up, and a darn good one. Should you be wearing a mask or a respirator when you're working with these products? Most of the professionals don't when they're working with the epoxies and a little bit of solvent. And you don't have to. You can read the safety data sheet, and that will give you all the information you need to make an informed decision for yourself. The polyaspartic material, I would say yes, definitely go to Home Depot, get one of those 3M masks, and they're $31, and they're not like the self-containment masks. They're the ones that have the cartridges in them, and that's a darn good idea. If you're just using it once and you have limited exposure, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're doing this repeatedly, the recommendation from all the professionals and people in the industry is yes, when using the polyaspartic materials, get a mask.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, let's talk about safety a little bit, because there are some safety guidelines that you'll want to follow. And just off the top of my head, when you're mixing material, wear safety glasses. It's just so easy to get something in your eye, and then you have to go to the emergency room, and it's just a real pain. So let's try to avoid that. Children, keep the real little ones away. If the young guys, 10, 12, 14, want to stand around and watch you work, that's probably okay, but they need to be well advised about the materials, and probably shouldn't be, well, especially the little one shouldn't be anywhere near it as far as being handling the materials. It's just not a good idea, and it's not worth your trouble to have an injury or an accident. And besides that, nobody wants to see somebody get hurt. So let's see, some of the other safety issues, just use common sense. The materials aren't toxic. They're not going to cause cancer. But you certainly don't want to be in an enclosed area. If you have a pilot light on a furnace or something, you might want to consider extinguishing that for just for the time being until the Xylene evaporates. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're rolling the epoxy that we just mixed. There's no real technique or anything. This is called the dip and roll method. We dip it into the bucket, wet the brush, just like you'd paint anything else. No real difference. I guess you could pour it out if you wanted. Some people do that. I like the dip and roll method for this, and it works for me. So you'll develop your own technique on what you like and what you don't like, and how you like to do things, because there's no, really exactly one way to do everything. People have their own ways of getting the same things done, and so we just provide a starting point for you, and then you're going to figure out what you like best. But just roll the stuff on, and the whole idea is to get it even. These are spikes. You've got to have these. I buy these at Masco. Every big city in America has a Masco, M-A-S-C-O. They're a supply store for masonry workers and people that work in masonry. And you got to walk on this stuff. So you're going to have one of these. They're like 22 bucks. Okay, not a huge amount, but for the do-it-yourselfers, go ahead and stop by your local Masco store or get online and get a pair of these, because you're going to have them. As you take these, I found it to be work nice to scoop it out like this, because you don't want these chips to get all over the place if you can help it. But just get them in there, and do all this before you start painting. I kind of did it backwards here, but that's okay. With the epoxy, we're not super stressed on time. Throwing technique. Let's start with the walls. Here's basically one method. You can just basically throw it against this this vertical facing, okay? Just like that. And it'll stick, and it looks to me like it's gonna turn out pretty good. So we're good with that. That's exactly how you do it. Here's another technique that I've used in the past. I'll show you. You basically get some in your hand, and you kind of rub it up against the wall a little bit, just gently. And that works too, okay? Both techniques are good, as long as you get... A lot of guys want to throw it downward. I don't do that. I throw it up and let the flakes settle in to themselves. You can't throw too much, because you're just going to scrape, only a certain amount's going to stick, and you're going to scrape up the excess anyway, okay? So you just let this chips, settle in, and this is called full broadcast, okay? You'll see a couple of different ways to go with these chips. You'll see what's known as a full broadcast, which is what we're doing, and that means we're throwing it to refusal. Okay? Oh, we're going to use this technique on this. We're throwing it to refusal. The other technique is to use a technique where you have a partial broadcast. And there's nothing wrong with that, if that's the look you want. The only problem with the partial broadcast is it's really hard to get it to look kind of uniform. You know what I mean? And a lot of people want uniformity, and I'm kind of one of those guys, so I like it. That's good. It's always good to roll. It's called rolling. okay, just like this. And it's always good if you can, and that's one of the reasons why you wear these shoes, to cross roll. So you can actually walk in it and then roll it the other way. That way you're getting a good spread rate, the spread rate you're looking for, and it just is a better way to make sure you get total coverage. Okay? Push that around a little bit. See, I tried using a 6-inch roller mechanism here when I'm used to using the 18-inch rollers. So I learned a lesson. I reminded myself why I never use these 6-inch rollers. Because using the 18-inch roller mechanism, I would have been done, a half hour ago. I was talking the other day to a friend of mine who's also been in the industry for the last 25 to 30 years, like I've been, and he and I kind of both agreed. It's really, I think the preparation is the key. What's on the bottom is less important than what's on the top, because we know this epoxy is going to stick and stick like the dickens, and stick really, really well. To create the finished product, it's going to require that you top coat it correctly. And we're going to go through that tomorrow when we get into scraping, which there's techniques I want you to know, and clear coating with the clear polyaspartic, which is quite a bit different than working with the, similar but different than working with the epoxy here.